You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from Icons, where listeners are introduced to incredible people working within the law enforcement community who have made a profound impact in our world. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. On this episode of Icons, host Madison Scott is joined by Suzanne Beam and Lisa Summers, volunteers at the National Law Enforcement Museum and retired law enforcement professionals. They join us in the studio to discuss their careers as women in law enforcement, and they'll share stories along the way and the importance of inclusivity and diversity within the law enforcement ranks. And now for Icons, featuring Suzanne Beam and Lisa Summers, a Women's History Month special.
Well, thank you, ladies, for joining me today for Women's History Month to talk about your careers in law enforcement. So thank you guys for being here. First thing is we're just going to start off with an introduction. So just want you guys to tell us a little bit about yourselves and then outline your law enforcement career for us. So Suzanne, do you want to start?
I'm Suzanne Beam. I'm a retired sergeant from Montgomery County, Maryland. I retired in 2017 after almost 29 years on the department. And prior to that, I taught school for 14 years.
Wow.
I taught at the Washington International School and National Cathedral School for Girls before my husband left U.S. Park Police and got into the FBI. And then we went off to Indiana. But anyway, when we came back to the D.C. area, I just couldn't get a teaching job because people weren't moving. And so I said, well, why not law enforcement? So I put in several applications and I got hired by Montgomery County. Awesome. I was the oldest female in my class of 72.
Wow.
And I technically was the oldest person. And they called me Mom.
I did not know that. That's so funny. All right. Well, Lisa, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and law enforcement career?
Sure. My name is Lisa Summers, and I started law enforcement in 1984 after I graduated from college. And I was with the Arlington County Police for 7 years, Arlington County, Virginia, and loved it. But the department was a younger department, and there was some detective work that I really wanted to try to do, besides working patrol, which I loved it. I worked patrol most of my career, and I did some undercover and stuff like that. But I thought that maybe it was time for me to decide and do something different, so I decided to go federal. So I joined the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I worked there from 1991 till 2019, November, the end of November. Mm-hmm. And it was a great career. Both of them, everything that I wanted to do was law enforcement ever since I was like in 11th grade. So
you knew.
Yeah, I knew.
You knew that was your path.
There were signs when I was younger.
Well, my next question was what inspired you to go into the field of law enforcement? So kind of touching on what you were just saying, Lisa, you knew from a younger age. What kind of inspired that?
Well, when I was younger, I used to love to watch like the cop shows with my father and, family, but mostly my father. We saw all types of, anything from Mannix to Barnaby Jones and things like that. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people don't even know what these movies are or these shows are. And, I was just always enthralled by law enforcement. And over the years, I continued watching them. And, knowing that they are not true to life, a lot of them were actually very inspiring because you sit there and you think about it and you're like, could I do this? Could I deal with these types of people, different types of people every day and things like that? And it just was so exciting to me. So as I got older, I kept wanting to be involved in cop things. And next thing you know, in 11th grade, I declared, hey, it's happening. I'm going to be a cop. So Yeah.
Very good. Very cool. How about you, Suzanne?
I was kind of getting tired of teaching, and there was an Irish bar around the corner from where
Well, there
I
you go.
was living. So I got a job there part-time to work in the Irish. It was called Ireland's Four Provinces on Connecticut Avenue.
Mhm.
And that was a big cop hangout, whether you were DC, FBI, park, police. In fact, that's where I met my husband.
Oh, really?
And so I said, maybe this would be a lot of fun, because I had lots of conversation about what they did, what their job was like, and what the stories they told of what officers did, especially the DC officers. And so then that started me on my quest to maybe apply to the FBI. The hard part was I was told that as part of their application, you have to dry fire a 357 and be able to pull it so many times within a minute. So the guys would take me out to the parking lot, empty out their gun, and had me practice in the parking lot
my word.
of the Irish pub, dry firing it to build up my strength so I'd have an idea of what it's like.
Right.
Teachers don't carry guns. So.
Right. That's so funny.
So it was certainly a challenge, because when I went to my interview and I had to dry fire, they gave me the largest grip on the 357. My fingertip could barely reach the trigger, but I got my pulls in the required time. But then when my husband left U.S. Park, we went to Indiana, and we then from there, he transferred to the Presidio in Monterey to study Russian so we could get back here to D.C. And when I came back, there just weren't the teaching jobs. They were just not available. So that's when I started applying to Montgomery County Park, because I wanted to ride the boats and the horses and the scooters. And I knew the FBI was not going to hire me because of my age. I was right at that critical point. And then my husband came home with the Montgomery County Police application. And I said, there's no way they're going to hire a 38-year-old woman with 2 babies at home. But I filled it out. And in April of 1988, it went in. And in September, they offered me a job in 4 months, like a record-breaking background and everything done. And I started in September of 1988, and I've never looked back.
There you go. So that was obviously a big career transition for you. How did your family feel going from a teaching career then into law enforcement?
Well, my husband was all for it because he was in law enforcement and he felt I could do it. My kids were little. They were like 3 and 4. So that was tough going through the academy with young children. My dad, whatever you want, if that's what you want to do. And
if that's what makes you happy.
Yeah. My sister didn't like it, but that wasn't going to stop me. So I really, truly enjoyed my decision to get in at the time, not knowing what was to come in after I got in the academy. That was another story.
Another story for another time. So Lisa, you in 11th grade were like, I'm going to be a cop. This is it. How was your family? Were they super supportive of this as you went into that field later on?
Yeah, I am very blessed by the fact that my family has always been supportive of me for everything that I want to do. Now, did my mom cross herself all the time when I first started with the police department? Yes. She was constantly praying for me and, worried about if the gun was going to just go off or anything like this. But extremely supportive, wanted to support me because I was so enthusiastic about it. And I had worked a little bit with the college campus police when I was in James Madison University. And that really opened my eyes to some of the good things that they have to deal with and some of the bad things they have to deal with. And I was like, am I being realistic? And I'm like, yes, I am. It's not all fun and games. It's serious. There's a lot of things that you have to deal with, and you have to look at it in a way where you realize that you are an official person doing an official job. And, if people don't understand that, then, especially your friends, if they can't understand it, then unfortunately they're not your friends anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How like, obviously, Suzanne, you went in with 2 young children. How did that, for both of you in general, just how did this career impact family life for either of you?
Well, fortunately for me, Rich was in the FBI, so he had a Monday through Friday day job. So we had childcare during the week when he was at work. It's after I graduated from the academy and then went into shift work that it became a big challenge. Mm-hmm. And so we had set up childcare during normal daylight hours. And then after that, Rich, he became the primary caregiver.
Mm-hmm. There you go. How about for you?
I didn't have a problem with it. When I started the police department, I was single. I was in a relationship towards the end. It didn't work out. He was a police officer as well. And we split, and we still get along very well today. But after we split, because my department was so small and I wanted to do investigative work, I decided to leave also just because everybody knew my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just wanted to, go out on my own and start again, fresh. Yeah. And nobody has to know my business and all that stuff. It's just start fresh, start new. And so that's what I did. Mm-hmm. And so it never really affected my relationship because he was a police officer. He understood when I came home and I had a bad day in court or something like that. He knew what was going on and he knew how to talk to me and things like that. I found, of course, as time has gone on, if you're dating people and they're not in law enforcement, they're kind of like, oh, so you carry a gun. Yeah. So, or they have the jealousy thing where they're like, oh, so you're doing surveillance today. Who's riding with you? Mm-hmm. Is he cute? And things like that. So it's like, oh, for crying out loud, he stinks. I stink. We've been sitting here. We haven't slept in 3 days. It's like, no, nothing's going on. You know what I mean? So,
Right. It makes sense.
But it can be a problem in, your personal relationships and things like that. But, yeah. If you find a good person who understands and respects you, no matter what your job is, then that's the person for you.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's so right. Now, being women in the field, and am I correct? You both went in the 80s. Is that
yes,
right?
Ma'am.
Okay, yeah. So being women in the field, I don't know if that changed your experience you felt within this career field. Do you guys have any kind of thoughts on that about being women? And I feel like mostly a male-dominated job, honestly. How are your experiences with that?
Well, when I graduated out of the academy in 1989, they told me my shift assignment, I was told by other senior officers, oh, you're not going to like it. I ended up on a shift that hated women and hated blacks. They wanted to be an all male, white male shift. I had people come to me repeatedly, why don't you get off the shift? And I said, no, that's what they want me to do. I'm not running. I'm a tough chick,
Heck yeah.
And I'm going to stay here all as I'm asking is for them to teach me the job. Now, there was one black officer, I won't name, great guy. He warned me. He said, I want to tell you right now, they won't back me up on calls and they won't back you up on calls. And I said, well, we'll back each other up then. And we were in beats right next to each other. But it was very hard to come in and be told, you took a man's job. What are you doing here? The problem was I was married with 2 kids. I had nothing to offer all these single men, you know. They were more interested in the younger single women who just joined the department.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very tough time. I had many people try to get me to leave, and I was in that environment for my first 2 years. And I just would not be chased out of it. I just stuck it out. And then finally the commander or the captain of the station stepped in. He started hearing rumors. And then, of course, instead of moving the problem, they moved me and put me somewhere else. But it was on a more supportive shift. So
that's good at least.
Yeah.
Although you'd rather them address the problem, but at least you
the
didn't have to deal with it.
department back then, they always moved the victim, really, and left the other shifts to carry on. So it was tough.
Did that change, though, over time? Like, did you see more women entering in
yes.
your department and stuff, as time went on?
Oh, yes. Within 8 years after being on the department, as more women came in, the attitude was really kind of forced to have to change, and it did. But it was very confusing to me because it shouldn't have been like that when I started. But, I mean, I'd go in on a domestic violence call. I would get the 2 parties calmed down. And then one of the guys on my shift would come in and stir up the hornet's nest.
Charge them all up again.
And get them all going up. And so I ended up telling this officer after the call was over, I don't need you to come back me up. I'd rather go in and take care of it by myself. Now, that's really a foolish thought, but I hopefully made a point to him and I explained to him, stirring up the husband to continue busting up the furniture that they both own will not resolve the issue that they were facing. And we're trying to get them to come to a conclusion that is positive for both of them, or that one should leave for a while and go and cool off. So it was tough.
Yeah. How about for you, Lisa?
Well, when it came to working in law enforcement, for Arlington County Police, we were pretty lucky because we had a pretty good balance of women, especially on my shift, a midnight shift. I mean, there was a good third of us that were, that were women, and we were all kind of around the same age. Now, I started straight out of college, so I didn't have the benefit of the maturity that you had. So, I had a lot of growing up to do too. Along with some of the other people I worked with, and it kind of made us tighter. I've noticed that most of the men that I worked with were very supportive of us and almost treated us like little sisters or sisters of some sort, where I never felt uncomfortable in that way, especially on patrol. Anybody would mess with us, they're like, oh, no. In fact, one situation I had where I was brand new out in the field and I had just been cut loose, and one of the I got a call for a traffic stop where a guy fell asleep at the stoplight, and I go up to the car and he was drunk, and he had fallen asleep. He passed out, and so you take him through the test, and he blows in the breathalyzer or the Alka-Sensor, and he was drunk. So I'm still new, and I was like, I want to cuff him, but I'm not sure. And all these backups had come because it was a slow night on midnight, so I've got like all kinds of backup, and they're all like watching me and and whatnot. And I wasn't really paying attention, so I didn't handcuff him fast enough. And so the guy was just like, he kind of just walked over to his car and decided he was just going to drive away. And so I saw that, and I said, oh, no. And so I ran after him. I jumped on his, in the seat, in the driver's seat with him as he's driving away. So the door's open. I'm sitting on top of him. He's driving away, and he starts going down the street. So all the cops that had been standing there jump in their cars, and they're chasing us down the street.
Oh my gosh.
So I grabbed the steering wheel, and while I'm trying to steer it, it's starting to go towards a pole. So I take my elbow and I'm ramming it into his chest. Turn the car off, and he wouldn't turn the car off. So I jerked the wheel, was able to put the car in park and stop the car. And as soon as I stopped the car, I'm like, okay, this just happened. And the next thing I see is like all these men come charging from behind. They take me and they throw me out of the car. And then they grab the guy and handcuff him and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, but it was like, I was so new and stupid, but they were there for me.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, okay, you made a mistake. You got a little carried away. You saw too much TV.
Dives into the car.
Dives into the car and woo! Turn the car off. And, I was a hero. I'm like, what am I? When you look back at stuff, like there's so many things that we've done in patrol that you think about it later, like, wow, that was some kind of scary stuff. What was I thinking? What did I? But you don't think about it. You get scared later.
Yeah.
And then, but you do it now. It's like, okay, you got to make a decision. You make it quick. It's got to be safe. And the safety thing that I was worried about was this guy was drunk, clearly drunk, and he was trying to take off.
Mm-hmm.
And so luckily he wasn't hurt. I wasn't hurt. The car wasn't hurt or anything like that. But, but in answer to your question, the main thing is that the guys, because they were all backup, they were all guys and they were totally there for me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad to hear somebody had a positive.
It was positive, but
experience.
It wasn't always. There were some situations. I have to say that in the 80s, if you look at the 80s and you look at the like 2015, if I looked at both of them in the 80s, I'm telling you, they did not treat us right.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times where I'm like, what am I doing in this? Because there are those people out there. There was all those men that are like, you're not supposed to be here. You're not one of us. What are you doing, you teacher, you, or whatever like that, And I saw that. Mm-hmm. And some people actually came onto the job thinking, oh, well, I was this. I can't do law enforcement. It's like, yes, you can. All you need is maturity and integrity. And that's the most important thing. The integrity. If you don't have the integrity, you have no business being anywhere near here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That actually perfectly leads me into my next question. Great transition, Lisa. My next question was going to be, what skill sets did the two of you bring to the job?
Well, I brought age.
All that wisdom with you.
All that wisdom. I was a mom and a teacher, so that's 2 strikes right there, right? Now I'm a police officer, so I told my kids, that worked great with my kids. Don't try to pull the wool over my eye. But I taught at an international school where over 63 countries were represented. And I had never really traveled outside of the U.S. And being in the school, meeting all these children, mostly World Bank and International Monetary Fund, opened my eyes to the world that we lived in. And I learned to respect cultures and religion, and that we're one big world, whereas some of the officers had very narrow-minded about people.
Yeah.
Going back to that domestic fight, having the wisdom to try to calm and settle things down so maybe we could get somewhere and not come in and have somebody come in and stir up the problem. So,
well, you had the benefit of doing that, because you already knew and you're relating to the situation. Whereas when I started as a police officer, I didn't have the maturity. I had to learn that maturity. Here I am. I'm not even married. I'm like 23 years old, and I'm telling, okay, you husband and you wife, you need to work this out and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm sure at times they must be looking at me like, and what do you know? Didn't you just go to like a fraternity party or something? So, the fact that we had people who would come in and had these different careers and things like that was very helpful, especially females.
Having the exposure to different cultures was really
very important too.
It was very, very important, and because you had your areas of different cultures within the county, and I was more sensitive to that and their needs, and patient if they didn't speak English. I was very patient with that, where others lost their patience and just told them whatever to get off the call and move on.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think that comes so much just with the teaching profession.
Absolutely.
And the patience that you have to have. I taught for a year in DC, and that taught me a lot. It was fresh out of college, and I was like, wow, patience is a skill I need to work on with these first graders. So I think having that skill going into the law enforcement field is so vital and so important, for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's something you have to learn. It can't be taught it.
No.
You have to learn it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you have to acknowledge the fact that, I made a mistake with that. I need to learn patience. I need to watch and observe instead of the person who was getting upset during the domestic and, riling people up. He needs to step back and watch. You're controlling the situation. You're de-escalating. You're making things better. And then people can talk with calmer heads, and then you can decide, hey, do we need to separate you tonight, or do you think you can work this out? But that's what our job is.
Exactly.
We're not supposed to be going there and just arresting people just to get the thing over with. If you can work it out and calm the situation down, that's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what a lot of females have been able to bring to this job.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yes, most of the time, we don't have the physical strength to fight some of these 6'5" guys and things like that. But we do have the strength of our mouth.
The strength
and our brain.
Yes, the strength of our being able to talk people out of doing the wrong thing versus fighting them because we're not physically as strong as a male.
Right.
I mean, I fought enough males to know better.
Yeah,
throughout the career.
Don't get me wrong. If you want to throw down, let's go.
Right.
But the fact is, it's like, if we can talk through this and you put it back on the person, it's like, what is best for you? Let's try to work you through this situation. So calmer heads, and a lot of women are able to do that. Mm-hmm. Some men are too. The more mature. I'm not trying to say that a man does not do that.
Right.
But it does help to have the soft, gentle touch if things get very loud and whatnot, to bring it down a little bit and just talk. Let's work it and kind of work from your heart and talk to people, relate to them. We've had people, I'm sure you've had small children grabbing onto your leg. Please don't take my daddy. Please don't take my daddy. Things like that. When you have to take them to jail, and it's like, you got to calm the situation down and, bring it down to a level. It's like, we're not going to hurt your daddy. We're just going to let him calm down for a little while or whatever.
Right.
So, and you got to be able to talk like that.
Yeah.
No, de-escalation is very important.
Yes. Crucial. What would you say to girls who are thinking of pursuing a career in law enforcement today?
I personally, I'm not going to be the one that sits here and tells you don't get involved in law enforcement. That's not going to be me. Yes, there's challenges. At the end of my career at Arlington County, before I switched over to the Drug Enforcement Administration, there was the Rodney King situation going on. So there was a lot of, that kind of stuff that we had to deal with, where people are elevated, angry at us, just like they are now. You have to be more mindful of, what you say, what you do, but you should be that way anyway. But I wouldn't tell somebody to stay out of law enforcement. You're not going to get that from me. We always need people in law enforcement, but you have to be mature and you have to have the integrity. Those are the most important things.
For sure.
If and then you can work through a lot of the other things. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard having people yelling at you and doing things and calling you names that you you shouldn't have to be subjected to. But there's harder things in life.
Yeah.
I would probably start out by asking them, why are you interested? To find out where they're coming from. I don't want to give them ideas that they hadn't thought of yet. Once they've shared why they think they're interested, I would probably encourage them to work on building strong confidence and believing in themselves, because it is a tough job.
Yes.
There is great rewarding times when you help somebody, find a runaway, take them back home.
Right.
There are times where you see gruesome, horrible things. You've got to be prepared for that shock factor.
Yes.
Because mentally it's very difficult to deal with it. So it's not for the faint-hearted. But if you believe in yourself and you have that confidence, and you're the one out there playing with the boys when you're growing up, right? Then maybe this is something you might want to consider in. Do you like being outdoors? Do you like helping people? Do you like a change and never know what's going to happen the next minute in your career?
Right.
No 2 days are ever alike.
No.
So if they're interested in that kind of excitement, which could be horror or it could be a very rewarding outcome, then I would encourage them to take that route.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is, like she said, you have to, look into it, what you want and the realism of this. As for somebody who's not sure, whether it be federal law enforcement or if it's local law enforcement, I would suggest riding along with local law enforcement on Ride Along and actually see, can you handle people talking to you the way that they talk to you? There's, like I said, there's things that people say to you and whatnot. They think that they can say anything to you and you can just sit there and take it. Well, unfortunately, you have to take it. You have to sit there and listen to them call you all these names and stuff. And yes, you know that you don't deserve it. What I had to do was just, bite my tongue, pray for them as I'm walking back to my car. You know?
I don't think there wasn't, I've heard everything in the book been called everything in the book.
Oh, yeah, they're calling you words that you don't even know go together.
Yes.
It's just like, oh, that's a good one. Huh?
That's a new one. Haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just blow it off and there'll be a new tomorrow.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
The main thing, too, is you have to go in. I think, I was a little bit more fired up when I was new because your badge is like this big. But then it gets much smaller to right size. And then you realize that, you talk to people, you need to talk to them as they should talk to you. So you don't talk down to them. You don't make fun of them if they don't speak English and stuff like this. You work with them. You talk with them and then try to understand. How about you trying to learn a little bit of Spanish or a little bit of French or Chinese or something or whatever? Learn how to communicate with people or show that you're enthusiastic about them as people. And you're not putting them into a group and saying, oh, all of you guys are like this. No, you've got to be like able to relate to a lot of different types of people. And it's extremely important, to when you are in law enforcement that you are able to handle yourself and put your prejudices aside. All of us do have prejudices, but you need to put them aside. And then maybe you'll learn that you might be very wrong about some of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to giggle because at the international school, a couple of the teachers said, come here, Beam, we got to talk to you. The kids are saying they're cursing in their native language and you're not doing anything about it. So we're going to teach you these words and we're going to have you practice them so you learn them. So when you hear it, when they're out with you, you will stop them from saying that. So
Yeah.
through the help of other teachers, I learned certain Spanish and French phrases that became very helpful even in my career, though I barely spoke English. I had a tough time trying to learn another language, but anyway.
There you go. Well, I do have one more question for you guys, which is just in general from your career, what was your most memorable experience from the job?
For me, I served on honor guard with my department from 1994 until I retired. An officer on my new shift was trying to talk me into joining honor guard as a young officer, and I really wasn't sure that's something I wanted to do. And honor guard only allowed 40 people plus the commander, and they were full, but he was training me so when an opening occurred, I could get on the shift. And unfortunately, this officer was coming into our 4 to 2 shift, and a pickup truck pushed another pickup truck that went through his windshield. And a week later, he was declared brain dead, and we were all devastated. So after the funeral, I went to the commander of the honor guard and I asked to take this officer's place because he knew he was training me to come in, and they let me come in and join honor guard. And from that point on, I was at every police week, handled retirees' funerals. The happy side, we did graduations from the academy. So being a part of my department's honor guard was really a blessing and meant a lot to me.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
How about you, Lisa? What was the most memorable experience from your career?
Gosh, there's just too many.
Yeah.
From the police department to the Drug Enforcement Administration, I've had some really great positive experiences working with other departments. Memorables, gosh, you remember the first dead body you see, you remember the first person that dies in front of you, you remember the older woman that you saved from men raping and beating her, you remember the first big drug bust that you had, or the capture of the guy who was murdering people in D.C. With a shotgun stalker back in the early 90s with the Drug Enforcement Administration and Metro PD. There's just a lot of really good, positive relationships that I've had with, different, agencies and stuff. And I'm just very proud of my work. And I'm proud of being able to be part of Police Week, many times escorting families of those who've lost their loved ones and things like that. There's been many good, some bad, but everything was memorable. It's been a great career.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for spending this time with us and kind of diving into your careers and talking a little bit about what it's like to be a woman in law enforcement. Again, this episode is for Women's History Month, so we're excited to share these stories with our listeners, and love to have y'all back another time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Icons, featuring Suzanne Beam and Lisa Summers, with host Madison Scott, the museum's manager of volunteer services. We hope you found this conversation enlightening and will join us again for another edition of Icons, where we introduce listeners to incredible people working within law enforcement who have had a profound impact on the world. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.